Hello and welcome to the third episode of Unofficial Experts. Last week we talked a lot about photography and what it's like to live in LA and be a photographer. Today we have someone else who's from Southern California, my friend Kaila. Kaila, what's up?
Hello, I'm excited to be here. I like this idea. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's super fun. I'm your host, Preston Moore. I forgot to introduce myself, whatever. If you're on the third episode, you probably know that. But it's been a lot of fun so far, just getting to talk to a bunch of different people I know, letting them kind of show off whatever they're working on or just things they're passionate about to kind of just get the younger generation's perspective on just all kinds of different things. It's been super fun so far. And I'm excited for today because we're going to talk about fandom, which is a very broad topic, right?
Yes, but I think it's something just like really important to me because it's always been part of my life. And I think a lot of people on the outside of fandoms don't realize how intensive the fandoms can be and how close knit they can be. So I like to talk about that and let people understand what where our heads at, even though we look like crazy people who are obsessed with random stuff.
Right. But I mean, I think it's definitely good because, it brings people together.
Yeah.
It's something that if even like, especially with the internet nowadays, like things are so crazy to where you can connect with people on the internet who you live maybe not even in the same country as, just because you both like the same thing. And then you can become friends and eventually like meet in person. And that's the coolest thing, Has that ever happened with you? Like, have you met someone online through a specific fandom or whatever that you're a part of, and then met them in person?
Yeah, so actually I have a bunch of friends that I've met through the internet, and there was a time in my life where I was into fandoms, but I wasn't talking to people in fandoms, and I like always wanted to. So like back last year is when I really started to like get into the community and know people on a personal level, and that's when I started meeting people who are now like literally like my best friends. So like I have like me and my friend Jessica and Kimya met on Star Wars Twitter, and now we hang out like every day. We go on vacations together. We went to New York together to see Burn This, which starred Adam Driver last year, so that was really fun. And then my podcast, She3PO, I started with Tia, and she lives like 20 minutes from me, but I met her on Disney Twitter. So like it's all like making my life full right now.
Yeah. It's a good way to I feel like it's a good way to just network and you meet so many different people. Like you said, I mean, you started a podcast with someone who you hadn't met in person, but found out they live 20 minutes away. Like, that's the coolest thing to me, that we've grown to like this day and age. And I could go on and on about technology, but I won't. But so what do you consider like your first experience when you first started getting into a specific fandom? What was that? And what was that like for you, meeting people?
So I was actually pretty young because I was 8 years old, and I was really into the Jonas Brothers. And I was an only child, so I was on the internet a lot more than I should have been. But like I have a single parent mom, and she was always working, so I would just be on the internet doing random stuff. And so that was when I was on Team Jonas, which was the Jonas Brothers official fan club site. And I used to go in the chat rooms like every single day. Like I knew a lot of people on there. I remember one girl in specific was like Danielle. I don't know where any of these people are right now, because back then the only social media was like MySpace, and I couldn't have a MySpace yet. So we didn't know each other like faces or anything. We just like talked in the chat rooms like every day. But that was like 2008, 2010. And then from there, I got on Tumblr, and that's where like fandom really blossomed, I think, because you could like make GIFs, and you can write stories on there. You can put like videos on there. So like even though like on YouTube, like video compilations of different movies and TV shows and bands existed on there. This is a place where like you could put it there and people could like talk about it with each other. So that was like when I started really like, and then I saw things like Doctor Who and Sherlock and Game of Thrones, because without Tumblr, I would have never like seen those pieces of media, especially at such a young age. I was like 11, 12 when I first started watching all these shows.
Game of Thrones for a 13-year-old. I can't imagine what 13-year-old Preston would have thought. I would have hated it. I would have ran and hidden in my closet. Like, I would not have been a fan. I would have been terrified.
I thought so at first too. Like when I first watched the first episode, I was like, this is like a really serious show. And I get to like the end of the first episode and I'm like, wait, I see something here. So I watched like, I watched the series when season 2 ended. And then I was reading the books in like your reading time you had in middle school.
Mm-hmm. All the other kids are reading like kids books, like Magic School Bus or whatever, or The Giving Tree, stuff like that. And you're over here with like Song of Ice and Fire, 11 years old.
Literally.
That's so
Which
funny.
is like this thick, like huge. And then I'm like literally gasping in class because like somebody killed somebody and I'm like having mental breakdown in class. And then
I just imagine like an 11-year-old girl just reading The Red Wedding, just being like freaking out in class. I think it's so funny.
Oh, yeah. Wait, because I read The Red Wedding before I saw it in the show. So that was like, what?
Blew your mind. Yeah. I mean, because I like binged that whole show last summer because I hadn't seen any of it. So I was able to just like watch it straight through. Didn't have to wait like everybody else. And I remember just like texting my friend whenever I saw it. I was like, are you kidding me? And I'm not going to spoil it in case you're listening and you haven't seen it. But it's crazy, and you should watch that show and then just stop after season 7 and not worry about it.
That's very true. Wait, that's kind of amazing. You got to watch it all the way through like that. That's an experience.
It was really cool, and I had a lot of my friends who have seen it. They were all very they were pretty jealous of me because they were waiting like a year or 2 years in between seasons, and I was like, I'm just blazing right through this thing. Anyway, so you got into the Jonas Brothers fandom when you were like a little kid, and then you kind of got on Tumblr, and that was I know that personally I've not had a Tumblr, but I know that that's where fandoms have just gone insane, you know? So you've spent a lot of time, I know, because this is kind of how we met, through Star Wars Twitter, right? Just being on Twitter and engaging with other Star Wars fans. How's that been? And what have you said you met your podcast co-host?
Yeah, so Star Wars Twitter, I got on right before I went to Celebration in 2019. Celebration is the Star Wars convention that happens almost every year. And so I had tickets for that because I met a friend in class that I ended up being able to go with, which was a happy coincidence too, because he's really into fandom and we just happened to meet in class. So then from there on, I had my ticket and I was seeing like other people on Star Wars Twitter that were going. And then we were all kind of connecting about how we were all going to be going to Chicago in a month. And we're all from different places and we're going to be here and meet and stuff. So that's where it all started, just because knowing that we'd all be there soon together. And so I was making these connections and then I go there and like I meet everybody and everybody is so awesome. And just like having those face-to-face interactions like really solidified like a lot of like friendships I had on Twitter. And then from there on, like that's when like I had like a solid Star Wars group and we ended up booking our New York trip, which are all girls that went to Celebration from Star Wars Twitter. We lived like all over the United States. And we went to New York to see Adam Driver in June, and Celebration happened in April. So
it's just like 3 months where you just met these people for the first time in April, and then you're like, all right, we're all going to see Adam Driver in person.
Yes. And I'm from, huh?
I don't really blame you. I would also want to
No.
see Adam Driver in person as well.
It was really worth it. I would have been really mad at myself if I didn't end up going. And then next was Comic-Con, and like a bunch of us girls who went to Celebration were actually going to Comic-Con. So I actually got to see my friend Katie, who I met on Star Wars Twitter, who lives in Texas, about 4 or 5 times that year, because we went to Celebration together. We went to New York. She came to Comic-Con, and then D23 was in August, the Disney convention. So I ended up spending a lot of time with these girls.
Yeah. So you got to, you met them in April at Star Wars Celebration. And then you said you had a friend from Texas who you saw like 5 times that year.
Yeah.
That's crazy, because like you're from California. That's the coolest thing. That's just something that like, I think it's so awesome, because obviously like fandoms and stuff like those existed, you know, they've existed for years. Obviously. I mean, you look back to like when the Beatles were a huge thing, you know, obviously that existed, but the Beatles fandom way back then, they didn't have an online like forum that they can meet each other on. And today we have like so many. So you're able to connect with so many people from across the country and even across the world. That's something that, you know, I've been lucky enough, because I've been, you know, active on Twitter for, I'd say 5 years now, I think. I don't know. But through it, you know, I started a entertainment journalism website, and I got to meet a bunch of people through that. And so now I know a ton of people from across the U.S., but also like across the world. And that's the coolest thing to me. I know I've raved about it for half of this entire episode, but like meeting people in person that you've met previously, but only online, like you said, that definitely solidifies a friendship to where it's like, okay, this is a real like concrete thing. We've met in person, like we've hung out and we enjoy each other's company still, you know. I feel like that's really cool. And fandom in general just brings people together through that.
Yeah, and I think it's really important, because I feel like when you're interested in these types of medias in the way we're interested in them, because there's a lot of casual viewers who don't think about it and analyze it as much as somebody like us would. So I think it's important for us to be able to have these spaces, because sometimes like before I was really in fandoms and like knew a lot of these people, I felt really like an outsider to others, because I was super interested in all these things and I wanted to talk about them in depth, and like nobody else I knew in real life wanted to talk about these things like that. And I could just kind of tell when I would, you know, express these interests like in public or like on social media, like people would look at me like not in a bad way, but it's just like obviously like I was different. So
yeah, I think it's not even, you know, there's obviously nothing wrong with being like a casual viewer or something. You know, I'm a casual viewer of a good amount of things, you know, but when you're so invested in something, you know, for me with like Star Wars, for instance, which I know like both of us are like extremely into, I want to talk about like every single frame of The Last Jedi and why it's amazing. You know what I mean? Whereas like other people, you know, they'll watch The Last Jedi. They may like it, they may hate it, whatever. But, you know, to a lot of people, it's just another movie. And there's nothing wrong with that. But for people who are so invested and so into it and it really means something to them, it's really special to have other people that they can connect to, that they can kind of, you know, geek out a little bit with. You know what I mean?
definitely.
Yeah.
And that brings me to Comic-Con.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So that's like, okay, so I got into Game of Thrones and Doctor Who and stuff around 2011, 2012. I heard about Comic-Con on Tumblr in 2012, and that's when I was like up every day looking at all the new pictures released, watching all the panels the day that they're happening. And then I told my mom about it, and we lived in Texas back then. And she ended up taking me to Comic-Con in San Diego, California by the next year, 2013. We only had a 1-day ticket for Thursday, but it was still like amazing. I saw the Teen Wolf panel. I saw the Brave New Warriors panel, which had like Stephen Yoon and Matt Smith. So it was just like an amazing experience to be around like hundreds of thousands of other people who liked what I liked. Because back then I was a little young and I wasn't really like talking to other people in fandom spaces, which I look back now and it was probably a good thing just because I was so young to be talking to strangers on the internet. So I was just kind of there and like liking stuff and reblogging stuff, but not talking to other people. So then I go to Comic-Con and I'm like 13, 14 years old, and like I get to talk to like all these people in person. I'm talking to people like, 30s, 50s, 20s, like any age, anybody. And like even though I'm like a 14-year-old kid talking to like these like 40-year-olds, like we just like connect, and it doesn't matter like what age I am because we both are here for the same reason, to like enjoy these things that we really love. So like that was a really amazing experience for me because like I could look over my shoulder, talk to anybody around me, and we would just like have a good time, and I could talk about things that I liked for the first time like in my entire life.
Mm-hmm. And what you mentioned, you went to, I know you mentioned the Teen Wolf panel and some other stuff. So what, in your first Comic-Con and any Comic-Con, I guess, since then, what have been some of your favorite memories from Comic-Con?
Well, okay, so the first time I went to Comic-Con, I had that 1-day pass and I cosplayed as like a femme, the 11th Doctor from Doctor Who, which is Matt Smith's Doctor. And so when I went to the Brave New Warriors panel, I was really excited about that panel because it also had Kit Harington. So I watched Walking Dead, I watched Game of Thrones and Doctor Who, and they were all on that panel, Stephen Yoon, Matt Smith, and Kit Harington. And so I saw that people were like asking questions. And so even though it was my first Comic-Con and I was 14 years old, I ran in line to ask a question. And I was like it was hard because I didn't know the system yet. And so I was like one of the last 2 or 3 people to ask a question. And so I go like, my voice is cracking and I'm like, "Hi, Matt." And he's like, "Hi." And I'm obviously like wearing his cosplay. I was like, "Oh my God, I just talked to Matt Smith." And then I asked them like, if your character were to die, like how would you like them to die? Which was like pretty relevant to like all of their shows. And like the question like was a really good one because like everybody had like great answers and stuff like that. When I go home and people are writing about my question and like the answers that they gave like in articles and stuff as like a highlight of the panel. So I was like, wow, maybe, and that's why I'm a journalist now. No, I don't know. I've always had a knack for it. I don't know. So like after that, like my first experience in that happening kind of like jump-started me like really taking Comic-Con into my own hands, because the Comic-Con is so massive and there's so many things to do, and it's really what you make of it. So that's when I'm going to talk about my other experience that like most people know about if you like Teen Wolf. Yeah. Is when I think it was, I think it's the year after that I asked Dylan, okay, so it was a Teen Wolf panel and I already knew how to ask questions. So I run in line to ask a question at the Teen Wolf panel. And that was when I was like super into Teen Wolf. That was like my show. I was really into Dylan O'Brien. Like I was obsessed. And so I go, I want to say hi to Dylan O'Brien. So like I say, but there's also Dylan Sprayberry, I think, on the cast. So I had to make sure Dylan O'Brien knew I was talking to him. So I was like, hi, I love you, Dylan O'Brien. And then like I tried to ask my question, but like he called me, like he was like, oh my God, you're so cute. And like that kind of just hit me in a way that should not hit a 15-year-old girl. I was just very like, how do I go on with my life after Dylan O'Brien just called me cute?
You've reached the peak. There's no,
literally.
how do you go up from Dylan O'Brien calling you cute as a 15-year-old? Like, no, you're done. You're good.
You're done.
Nothing else can top that. You've already made it.
I was like, I could die right now and I'd be a happy girl. And then I start crying, obviously, as a 15-year-old girl would. And, but I get my question out. And then I like walk forward, and like at that time I would do this like thing, like it was something I did in my daily life too. Like when I would just get overwhelmed, like I would just kind of like crouch to the floor. So I was like crying and like hyperventilating. I like crouched to the floor, and they usually like film the person who's like asking the question. So like they film me, and then I crouch to the floor, so they have to like drop the camera down so that they could see me crouching on the floor. And I'm just sitting there crouching on the floor, and they're just like filming me, and everybody's watching me freak out.
Like,
and the whole cast is really
they're like, this 15-year-old girl just got called cute by Dylan O'Brien, and now she's in the fetal position. Someone please help.
Yes, exactly. Like the whole cast was really sympathetic with me, and they're like, Dylan just like was like, okay, like whatever I can do to help you like stop crying, and like there. And then I think Holland was like, oh, like I love your outfit, and like I was just like crying, and then some random person in the audience was like, give her your name tag, and then that's when Dylan was like, okay, you can have my name tag. And I got to walk up to the stage, and he gave me his name tag. He signed it for me, and he hugged me. And then there were like a million gifs of me on Tumblr. And I was like, that's me.
You became, sorry, there's like a fly flying around. So if you're watching the video episode and you see me swatting, it's because there's a fly. But so you became like Tumblr famous just because Dylan O'Brien gave you his name tag after you crouched down on the floor because he called you cute.
Yes. So that was a time.
That sounds like a time. What a story. That's crazy. Dylan O'Brien has never called me cute, so you've got me beat already. That's awesome. So I want to talk a little bit about, we hit like Teen Wolf and Comic-Con and Jonas Brothers and all this stuff. I want to talk a little bit about Star Wars. What has, and specifically your podcast you mentioned. You have a podcast called She-3PO, right?
Yes.
Gotcha. That, I really like that name, first of all. That's
Thank
really cool.
you.
It's very creative. And so what's the podcast for? Tell us about that.
Well, so me and Tia are both women of color, and we noticed that in the Star Wars fandom, it just seems like it's mainly like male and white voices that, you know, are uplifted in the fandom. And we don't necessarily like agree with all of the voices that are in the Star Wars fandom, and it can be like a little suffocating when like all these voices are like the main voice, and it doesn't really reflect how you feel or how other women or people of color feel. So we wanted to like create a fandom so we can like voice our opinions, feel seen, feel heard, and like have other people like us feel seen and heard as well.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. Like, that's really special because as a white man, like, I know that they kind of, you know, are, especially like Star Wars is probably one of the main fandoms where this is present, where like white men basically run the discourse almost, it seems like sometimes, especially, I mean, you look at even within like the Star Wars community, like filmmaking, you know, the people that are at the top making the films, like basically are all white guys, you know? And, you know, first of all, I mean, that kind of sucks, but it's important that at least, you know, within the fandom, and I know that like Lucasfilm has done a lot better, or is starting to do a little bit better lately with, you know, hiring Taika Waititi, which is pretty cool. But, you know, it's still something that the Star Wars fandom specifically really, really needs. I think that is something that Star Wars as a whole could definitely work on. And I think it's really cool that you guys have a podcast. So you're doing it. You're out here like actually making a difference with something that needs a difference to be made. You know, we need more diverse voices so that we can gain, you know, all different kinds. I mean, diversity is so important, and within a fandom especially, because you don't want one singular voice, one singular take, you know, running all of the discourse. Everything that we talk about, everything that we love about Star Wars shouldn't be from this one sect of people. There should be multiple sects of people that can come in and say what they love, you know, things that mean something to them, you know? So what have you found, I guess, that where your opinion or yours and Tia's on your podcast, how has that differed from the mainstream, if that makes sense?
I think like a lot of this is gonna generalize. Sorry for generalizing, but I feel like a lot of males really males in the Star Wars fandom really value like just like the original consistency of the original trilogy, and like want to bring that into the sequel trilogy when the series is good because it's like ever, you know, changing and evolving. So I feel like The Last Jedi like was really disliked by a lot of white males because like, you know, it challenged like a lot of themes in Star Wars, which I think was a good thing. I think it's always great to show like different storylines and points of views, because a lot of people are going through a lot of different things, and it's good to like be diverse in those conflicts. But not like a lot of I feel like the white males were like not happy with that change, and they just wanted everything to like stay the same. And that's why like in the end, like when The Rise of Skywalker went back and took back a lot of things that The Last Jedi was trying to do, and kind of stuck with like, you know, maybe like what the original trilogy, like with Palpatine and stuff like that, and like that Rey is actually has a lineage from like a big person. So they ended up liking that, which like me and Tia obviously like were unhappy with, because it said a lot. It was a little like misogynistic that Rey would have to be from a powerful person to be a powerful woman, and she can't just be a powerful woman on her own. So I feel like it's good to highlight these things, me and Tia, because maybe like a male wouldn't understand that about Rey's storyline, and maybe if they heard it from a woman, they might get it. You know, if we all just like listen to each other, we might get each other's point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I think generally speaking, for you know, it generally probably means a lot more for a woman to see Rey, this protagonist of a Star Wars trilogy, than for a man to see Rey. You know what I mean? Like that definitely it carries more meaning, I'd imagine, you know? And I definitely hear what you're saying. There's a very large portion of the fandom that became kind of toxic, I think, in a way, to where they were, you know, kind of, you know, you look at Kelly Marie Tran, all of the harassment that she went through online, it's just completely unfair. And a lot of that comes from The Last Jedi, because that movie did challenge a lot of the original themes of Star Wars. You know, Luke Skywalker didn't need to come in and be a badass Jedi and save the day. You know, he came in, fought a battle, and with peace, basically won with peace, never attacking once, you know. And it also comes in and says Rey doesn't need to be this, she doesn't need a powerful Force user from her past to be powerful now. She can be Rey, and that's okay, you know. And I definitely hear what you're saying, and I think that there was a big part of that toxic fandom, and a lot of that conversation was driven by race and sex, and that's not very cool. And it's definitely not okay. So I think it's awesome that you and Tia have that going on. I've listened to a couple episodes and I love it. So it's really, really awesome that you guys have that, I'm zoning out, to have that space to really amplify your voice. You know what I mean? I think that's really special. I would love to talk about this for another half hour or another 2 hours, because I could talk about Star Wars all day, or just fandom. I think it's really cool. Yeah. But we are out of time, unfortunately. So before we go, do you have any last words? I'll give you 15, 20 seconds.
Oh my gosh. I just say, like, enjoy your fandom the way you want to. Take it as it is.
Absolutely. Wise words. Take it as it is. Enjoy it the way that you want to. I love that. That being said, if you've listened, thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Kaila, for being here. It was awesome. I'm really glad that you were able to join. If you've enjoyed this episode of Unofficial Experts, make sure to drop a like or a 5-star rating wherever you may be listening. You can follow the podcast on Instagram at Unofficial Experts and on Twitter at UnofficialXPod. You can follow Kaila on Twitter at Kaila_Ren, I believe. Kaila _REN. Got it. Cool. Unofficial Experts is presented by the Deconstructed Podcast Network, deconstructing today's world from a young perspective. Make sure to check out the other 2 shows under the DPN banner, the Disney Deconstructed Podcast, where they break down all kinds of Disney news, and the Maybe You Should Care podcast, where they talk about what we all love, politics. So thank you for listening. And next week, we're going to go a little bit more in depth into the geeky side of the world, and we're going to talk a lot about cosplay with my friend Luke, who is, I would consider, an unofficial expert of cosplay. So thank you, Kaila, for listening, and we will see you next week. Thank you.